All right. Hello, everybody. It is Tuesday. Tuesday's Mastermind Speak to Grow. My name is Kathy Riley. I am your speaker, trainer, leadership, and communications expert. I'm the Queen Cat Herder here, helping you say words that matter. So say what you mean to get what you want, right? Because communication is complex because you know what? We're humans. Humans are complex. So what words can you use to grow your business? I am super excited that I have the fantastic Miss Katie joining us today. I have known Miss Katie for a few hot minute here, a couple years now. I just absolutely adored her, have her come speak to a group of mine about podcasting, and she walks the walk. There's not a lot of entrepreneurs out there that I know that truly walk the walk. And she is one of them, which is why I'm like, you're going to be my friend. And then, you know what happens? She ends up moving in my neighborhood because she likes me that much. Little did we know, like a year later, we're neighbors, really? I
Like
love it.
right around
So
the corner from each other neighbors. And I've still never seen you.
I I know. I just walked my dog past her house yesterday, but she was at the Abs game. So I will tell you guys this. Put your contact information in the chat. Schedule one-to-ones. Get to know the other people. We got some new faces here, and I love that. So get to know each other. I am going to, before I forget, I am going to put the conference info in the chat because a Chiefs conference is coming up and you all need to be there. So if you're not already, use the link, register. You want to be there. And last but not least, before I forget, also my speaker academy. I'm sharing the link with that as well because you guys know that as a speaker, I want to pour into you. I want to see more of you on stages. And these are the tools. I'm going to teach you the tools, the basics. How do you get on more stages? Speaking of stages now, this is why I have Miss Katie here because I truly believe podcasting is one of the best ways to grow your business. And she's going to, tell us more juiciness on that. So Miss Katie, she's a transforming social media marketing guru with her less than 4 post strategy. So we'll talk about that in a hot minute too. With 2 decades of expertise, Katie's unique methods help clients achieve more growth while posting less. Leveraging platforms, storytelling, Katie tailors tactics to each brand's goals, driving measurable results effectively and efficiently. So, we talk about speaking, work smarter, not harder. And so before we get into the podcasting, you talk about this 4 post strategy. So, first of all, would you consider podcasting social media?
No.
No. Okay.
So podcasting is the way to create one piece of long form content that is going to supercharge not just your social media, your emails, your websites, your YouTube, your blogs, your LinkedIn, you name it. It's going to do everything because if you're creating that one long form piece of content, it's going to make the rest of your life so much easier. And I think that a lot of people are thinking that, well, if I want to have a podcast, I need to have all this equipment, I need to have all this gear, and you don't. And they're also thinking, well, what am I going to talk about for an hour? And you don't need to talk for an hour either. The biggest thing is consistency. So remaining consistent to your show. And 2, finding a format that works. And it took me a while, but now I do 2 episodes a week. And you might say, Katie, you're crazy. But it's because I found the format that works for my audience.
I love it. So, okay, what is the name of your podcast?
So my podcast is a top 1% podcast. It's called Rocky Mountain Marketing. Episodes come out twice a week. Every Tuesday, it is an interview with another digital marketing expert. And it's around 30-ish minutes. I try to keep it between 25 and 30 minutes because the average commute is 28 minutes. So I want people to listen to all the goodness in one car ride. And then on Thursdays, it's a solo episode. So I talk by myself and I try to keep, I'm, as you can tell, everyone, I'm pretty long-winded. So I do my best to keep it under 12 minutes. Um, but once I get going, man, it's hard to get me to stop. But 8 to 12 minutes. And honestly, adding those Thursday episodes in saved my podcast. And we can talk about that here too. But I mean, you have to find what works for you and your audience. But once you have the consistency, you know, set, then being like, all right, so what, looking at the metrics, what does my audience want from me? And that's where I learned that, hey, they want more Katie Brinkley. So here you go.
So how do you know this is going to be, I think, a difficult, how do you know what your audience is going to want?
Yeah, and this comes back to looking at social media too. You have to know who your ideal client and customer is because there's a lot of reasons that you can have a podcast. You can have it for thought leadership, so like those are my Thursday episodes. You can have it for networking. Those are my Tuesday episodes. Or you could have it for lead gen. That's how my podcast started. I started my podcast in April of 2020 when all of us were given the gift of time. And I was recording episodes from my basement. And I was like, well, how am I going to find new business for my company? That's where the podcast came in. And I was connecting with my ideal client on LinkedIn and saying, hey, will you come on my podcast? And I'd love to learn more about your business. I'd interview them for 30 minutes, ask them like how they got started and, what are like some of the struggles that you guys have and how like, so for marketing, how's social media been working for you guys? Have you guys been implementing that now with COVID happening? How's your social media? And almost all of them said like, oh, it's been kind of a back burner issue, but now we're trying to learn on it. Okay, at the end of the recording, I say, just so you know, I'm doing a training on this. It's free training, 30 minutes if you'd like to come. Now I'm sitting in a room, like I just talked with them for 30 minutes. They said this was a problem. I have an offer for you. So it was lead gen for me at the beginning. So this is again a long way of answering your question here, Kathy. You have to know what the goal of your podcast is going to be. And
Yeah.
the great thing about it is it's your show. So you can say like, I want it to be for lead gen. Okay, I've got enough leads. I'm not going to stop my podcast. What if I make a shift and have it more networking? Or what if I do this? So you can change up the format. That's where seasons come in. But knowing what the goal of your show is originally will help you tailor the rest of the content, the questions that you're asking, the guests that you're getting on, the topics that you have.
Oh, I love that. So it's at the end of the day, you start with the end in mind.
Yeah,
So knowing your genius. So I talk, every single person I think needs to be a speaker. Every single person has an amazing story. And in our business, one of the things that, and this is a question you even talked to me about last year was, I'm ready to launch my podcast. It's just, what do people keep asking you about? Like, what's they want your expertise. What is it that they keep asking you about? Turn that, your genius, into a podcast, right?
totally. Yeah. And for those, I mean, I love that you and I are having this conversation, Kathy, because this was really the confidence builder for me to get on stages. When you practice your craft over and over and over again, whether it's you by yourself, I mean, in the closet so you have better sound, or, talking into your voice memos on your phone. I mean, if that's how you have to start, great. But the more you talk, the more you realize what it is that you're passionate about, what your superpowers are. And then that way, when you go to an event, you can say, I do this, this, and this confidently. And then you can get on stages and really share your message. So I feel like podcasting is like the entry to having that stage confidence.
Totally agree with that. My clients, They'll say, okay, I got to get on stages. And that's one of the first things I'm like, start with the podcasting because it's not that difficult to get on podcast stages. So what would you recommend if we've got individuals here, we've got amazing speakers here, they want to get on podcasts. What would you say they need to do to get on a podcast?
So if you're saying, Katie, this sounds great, but I really don't want to have my own show, well, hopefully someday I can persuade you to change your mind, because you should do it. And you don't, again, like I said at the beginning, it doesn't need to be an hour long. My solo episodes are between 8 and 12 minutes. And that's why I'm like, I got 8 minutes. I can go ahead and just record something. Like I saw this cool new tool. I bet my audience would like it. Let me just talk about the tool. So don't worry about the length. Like focus more on the consistency and getting started. So don't let that hold you up. But if you're still saying, Katie, I don't want to have a show, I just would like to be a guest, that is another great way to get used to being on the microphone. The biggest thing with just going the guesting route is you're going to share the same story over and over and over and over and over again. And it's going to be really hard for you to continue creating content from being like, hey, I was a guest on this show. I was a guest on that show. And you're sharing that with your audience. And they're like, yeah, I already know this about you. Katie, how many times are you going to tell me that you started with MySpace? I really don't care anymore. So I mean, but for that audience, it's new to them. So I mean, keep in mind that if you're going to go just the guesting route, you should have maybe 3 to 4 talks that you feel confident in sharing for a variety of audiences. Again, now you guys know why I said like it's hard for me to do 12-minute short solo episodes. In answer to your question, Kathy, if you do want to go just down the guesting route, I love the tool Podmatch. I am an affiliate for them. So if you want to check them out, join podmatch.com/Katie. Um, and you'll get the lowest rate for it. You can be on it as just a guest. If you have a show, you can be a guest host, and they'll help. It's like Match.com, but for podcasters and podcast hosts. And it's the most affordable way that I found for you to really get on shows, without having to go through a podcast booking agency. They're great, but as somebody that has a show, I get cold pitched so many times, I just delete them. I only go through Podmatch, or through social media to get on shows.
Oh, I love that. So while I'm asking my next question, if you can put the link in the
Oh,
chat,
sure.
so that way everybody has it, because I saw people writing stuff down, and this way they can save the chat for later. All right. So, getting on podcasts, having a couple different talks. And part of what I teach is like, as a keynote speaker, you can say the same 3 to 4 tools in 10 different ways. So knowing that your core message involves, these 5 things, you can change your story based on your audience. So you guys, you see how you can apply that to podcasting based on, also you want to look at what's the podcast about, and does
Totally.
your tools and tips make sense to be on there? So that's the guesting component. And I've got clients, I actually have a client who had 60, went on 60 podcasts in a year. Was just like, let's just keep going. And it was fantastic. And it launched him into doing his own show.
Yes.
So
It,
it's
it
a
it's a great like entryway into gaining the confidence. And Kathy, I love what you said there, because if you like, so I know who my target audience is. We elevate CEOs to become thought leaders and disruptors in their industry. So I can go on real estate podcasts. There's a lot of CEO realtors. I can go on entrepreneurship podcasts. I mean, like, so knowing where your target audience is, like, what are they listening to? Think about that. So, I mean, I've been on the Bigger Pockets podcast, and most of the time on Bigger Pockets, they have other realtors on it. But guess what? If I want to try and sell to realtors, what if I go in and say how to make social media work for your real estate business to that podcast? I'm the only social media person they've ever had on the show. So, like, now it's like, oh, wait a second. Yeah, this is a different perspective. So, think about how you can bring your superpower to somebody else's audience, especially too if they're always talking to the same type of person, the same type of conversation. It's going to be kind of like, ooh, this is something different.
Yeah. Oh, you led into the next question, or what I wanted to talk about is how, once you have your zone of genius, your talk, then let's say you launch your own podcast. Does it, or how much does it elevate you as the expert?
Yeah, I mean, if you have your own show, like it automatically is it's going to give you, I mean, I think that a lot of times we get caught up in the numbers of who's listening. And yes, I mean, we always want more numbers, but we think that we failed if we don't have like, oh, well, I only get 50 downloads an episode. Okay, hello. Who would like to sit and like present for 30 minutes to a room full of 50 ideal clients and customers? Yeah, that'd be pretty sweet. I mean, yes. And I think that a lot of times we get caught up in like the Joe Rogan size numbers and, the Call Me Daddy size numbers that it's like, well, let's focus in on what the goals are of the podcast. And if it's you positioning yourself as a thought leader, you're in front of a room of your ideal clients, whether it's 6 downloads, 60 or 600. Like, think of them as real people that have decided to like sit down and hear you speak. That's all that's happening.
So if we're taking the next step and we're going to launch our podcast, what
Mhm.
would you say is some of the tools, and what do we need to get started?
So a lot of times we get caught up in the equipment. Like, you have your microphone, your headphones there, Kathy. I got my fancy microphone with the arm and all that stuff. And I got, all of the things. I got lighting over here. It's all great, but I mean, you don't need that to get started. I would say like there's some tools that you can have that are just going to make things easier. I record all of my podcasts. I'm not an affiliate for them. I record all my podcasts in riverside.fm. The reason being is it's a software built specifically for recording audio. So if like Zoom, this is great for conferencing. We can see each other. I can talk to you, you can talk to me, but it's all in one track. In Riverside, you get separate audio tracks, a joint audio track, separate video tracks. They even have a new AI component where it will take out the ahs and the ums. So I mean, Riverside.fm is a great tool. And I think it's only like 12 bucks a month. I don't think it's expensive. Um, and then hosting. Where are you going to host? And Kathy, I know you and I have talked about this. And I mean, I host on Acast. A number of our clients host on Buzzsprout. I, the one that I've used in the past that I don't recommend is Spreaker. As soon as I moved to Acast, I got a lot more analytics and insights. My download numbers somehow magically went up. So I don't really know what happened, but I like Acast. Those two things, like having a
Okay.
decent spot to record and a good spot where you can host.
Okay. Can you put those two things in the chat so
Yeah.
that people know how to spell them?
Yes.
Um, I remember you had to text. I'm like, please text that to me so that I know. Because this, you guys, the equipment, the microphone I have, it was like $100 on Amazon.
Yeah.
It wasn't anything fancy. I think it is important that you do have clear audio. But these things are incredible.
That's what I was just gonna say, Kathy. I mean, like, so if you guys want to, okay, homework. You guys need to listen to last week's episode of Rocky Mountain Marketing, the Thursday one, because so the past 2 weeks I've been traveling. I spoke at an event in DC and then I spoke at an event in Palm Springs. I haven't been in my office to talk into the microphone. So but I'm committed and I'm consistent. So I just use my voice memo on my phone for the podcast and tell me if you think how, it doesn't sound great. So, I mean, the biggest thing is staying consistent. Like it really is like out of 4.5 years of having this podcast, like I've missed emails to my list. I've missed doing social media posts. The podcast is the one thing that's like a non-negotiable I can't miss. So And I think that that's why like I have my audience, I've grown and it's helped my business. So
So on that note, it's like the next question I want to ask is what has podcasting done to your business?
it's done everything because I come from radio. So I used to work for the Rockies and the Broncos and did their post game interviews. So I mean, like I'm used to talking into a microphone, but when it came to having a podcast, I was really nervous because I thought I was going to need to have like a cool, like an entire like studio and setup and all the things. And what would I say about social media every week, and how was I going to find enough people to interview? And I found all the reasons why I would fail. But I've been doing it. I'm over 300 and like 15 episodes. Produce more content now. Having a podcast, one allowed me to make incredible connections with people. Like, so I was speaking, I would see people speak on stages, and then I'd be like, you have got to come on my podcast. I love, how great would it be to sit down and like talk with somebody one on one that you've only typically seen speak on a stage? And people were saying yes. And, I was getting conversations with potential leads. I was sitting down with them for 30 minutes, learning about their business to see if I was a right fit. So I think that the podcast was everything as far as like growing my business, growing my network, and growing my confidence.
Oh, I love that. And so it has the podcast also elevated you to speak on bigger stages?
Yeah, totally. Sorry, I was just answering here in the chat. I mean, I wasn't really on any stage um before this. I think that having the podcast allowed me to find my true differentiator. Because there's a lot of people, I mean, like, I'd love to say that I'm the only social media and podcast production company in the world, but I'm not, And so this is where I think that, like it allowed me to be like, well, this, Katie, you're really passionate about social media, but about being effective and getting in and getting out so you can live your life, not about not being on social media so much, So yeah, that's pretty different than what most people are saying on social media. And it just allowed me to really find my differentiator so that I could then go and pitch stages. And now I just spoke, like I said, two weeks ago to Rosetta Fest, which is the nation's largest healthcare conference. And then I just got to go and stay in a mansion and speak at a private mastermind retreat, like two totally different avenues. You know, both were paid opportunities, and it's because of one, knowing my message that came from the podcast, and that allowed me then to write my book. Um, and that allowed, again, it snowballed everything, and it wouldn't have happened if it wasn't for the podcast.
So it just builds that street cred, right? You
Mhm. Yeah.
create that posture, right?
Yes.
That expertise.
Yes.
And so I want to, thank you for, your time today. But, we keep talking about your zone of genius, your zone of genius. Why don't you take a minute and talk to us truly about your zone of genius? We've talked about podcasting, but then what you've talked about helping CEOs up level their social media. Talk to us a little bit about that and
Yeah.
yeah.
So we, again, I have a social media agency and podcast production company, and now they're really going hand in hand because I've learned from doing it myself that having a podcast can change your entire content strategy. Um, and it's not just the hashtag new episode alert kind of social media. So I developed a whole 4-post strategy where you can get in and get out and be effective, grow your audience and grow your leads on social media, posting just 4 times a week, but using that podcaster as the main theme to drive your content. So,
Uh,
for example, if this was Kathy's podcast, which is normally about speaking, she would have her very first post be something like, "Do you have a podcast?" I mean, that took me maybe 3 seconds to say. Maybe it would take her 5 seconds to write. That's a post. The second post is an elaboration where we talk about she establishes her thought leadership. Third post is a community. What was her experience launching her own show? And then the fourth post is, by the way, I had social media expert and podcast expert Katie Brinkley on my show, and she gives us the whole rundown on why you need to have a podcast for your business. Comment podcast below. and I'll send you the link. So, I mean, that was 4 posts that I was, I mean, they are all very different. They have an
Ah.
underlying theme, and that's what I've developed and what I teach and what we implement for our clients. And yeah,
Is that what your book
and
is
it's all in
about?
the book too. So if you want to read the book, you grab it. Yeah, the book's here, but it's underneath a whole bunch of papers. But it's behind me. It's the social shift.
So do you have the link to your book? I'm assuming
You
it's
you
on Amazon.
It is on Amazon. So you can get it hardback on Amazon, or you can get it via Kindle. I'm in the middle of
Ah,
rebuilding my website. So you used to be able to get it on my website too, but that's been kind of a nightmare with
oh,
rebuilding websites. So
I'm doing the exact
I'm just
same
telling people
thing.
Amazon for now.
It's Amazon for now. And what's the name of it again?
The social shift.
The Social
I'll put it
Shift.
here.
I
Yeah.
love it. And that's one of the things I will tell you as an author. So Katie, this is homework for you. Always have a copy of your book
I know it's right.
because you want to be
Yeah.
able to have it. There you go. So this is, this is a tool you always use every time you speak. You go
I
up
know
there.
it's back here, but now it's all blurry. I got this at one of my speaking events. I got my own Funko and yeah, so
That's awesome.
yeah.
So let's does anybody have any questions for Miss Katie? If you could put them either in the chat if you can't talk, or you welcome to unmute yourself.
Yay.
All
Thanks.
right. We got some connections on Instagram and um LinkedIn. I love that. Love that. Mac, what you got? I could see.
This was awesome, and it's very timely for him because I just started a discussion about starting a podcast with Mamie Lamy last week, tied into the veterans chapter that I'm running. So I don't know how you pulled this off, Kathy, but I'm really glad you did.
This is it's Katie is so juicy. And do you have anything to offer our guest here today?
Yeah, I mean, like I do have the CEO's checklist to podcast success. If you guys want that, you will be signed into my email list. But I promise I'd like send good stuff. Like it's not like spammy stuff. You'll learn things from it. Um, and you can get that at katiebrinkley.live/checklist. I'll put that in the chat. But yeah,
Oh, okay.
um, yeah, it's like a checklist of like equipment you need and blah 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 blah. Like as you want to up level your podcasting journey.
Perfect. And one of the things that I love that she says is just do it. Just get out of
Yeah.
your head, just do it.
The
Right?
biggest thing, and Kathy, you and I have talked about this. Like with the relaunch of your show, I'm like, just make it past 6 episodes because that's the average length of a podcast. People give up after 6 episodes because they either don't they burn out. They're like, oh, no one's listening. Seriously, even if it's just your mom listening, don't worry about it. Just stay committed because if anything, you're creating content for yourself to share. You can you could take all this and run it into ChatGPT and turn it into a book. I mean,
That,
that's possible now. So I mean, like, just do it and make it past 6 episodes, and you're in it for the long haul. And then someday you'll
woo!
be here 4.5 years later, being really excited about podcasting.
Well, and I'm noticing because just in the last couple months, I keep talking about, breaking bad communication. I'm launching my podcast. People are like, really? And I've got bookings for the next 2 months of guest speakers. People who would give me like NFL players
Hmm.
are going to be on my show. I'm
Yeah.
like, great googly moogly. And he's like, well, I'll be on yours and you be on mine and we'll do this. And I'm like, so it's creating an additional posture for you. And it doesn't cost a lot of money. It doesn't take a lot of time. I mean, I'm still learning the intricacies of it because I'm doing it
Well,
all myself.
even Kathy, I told you there's that tool with the script, and
Yeah.
the script is a tool where it's basically like editing a Word doc and it'll edit your podcast for you with the video and the audio. I mean, there's so many tools out there. Like again, like now like the cost is getting higher, but I mean,
Yeah.
if you're doing it yourself, there's really no reason for you not to do it. And I think that AI is, like I said, Riverside will help automatically get rid of the ahs and the ums and the weird silences for you. So like, sorry, there's no excuses.
None. None. Any other questions?
Uh, that would be me. I just want to say thank you for the opportunity again for all the presentation. That was a lot of resources that you provided. And I think I've been in the space that you mentioned during this presentation. I actually had a podcast. I called it Crossing Bridges. Just as I was discussing with Katie before the event started, that I was sharing my experience working in the criminal justice system in Texas. And I did about 26 episodes. I didn't have a lot of followership and I think I was discouraged. So I stopped. But the truth of the matter is that all that content is actually on my YouTube right now on that podcast, and I've had over 1,000 views on each of them. So this will probably encourage me again to think about starting again. But right now, I'm actually in the process of attending or being on a lot of podcasts to talk about my coaching and my nonprofit here in Houston. So thank you, and I think I'm inspired.
Yay.
Yay! That's what it's all about. Any
It
other
is.
questions, takeaways, ahas?
All right.
I just want to
So
say
let-
thank you, Katie, because I've
Yeah.
been thinking about doing a podcast for a while and even like strategizing. Ooh, I have this great closet in the basement where I could get started. So I just want to say thank you because you just threw a whole bunch of resources that are going to be super helpful, and the how to get started in the 4 episode like guidance is just super helpful. Thank you.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I'm so glad that it was helpful for you guys. And, the hardest thing is the consistency. So, I mean, just like hold yourself consistent. Like, I know I got to leave by 3:06 if I'm going to make it to school in time to pick up my kids. Like that is my hard deadline. So, I mean, if you give yourself like that sort of a deadline and make yourself stay that committed, like you would if like I can't leave my kids sitting at school by themselves, you'll be set up for success.
I love it. I love it. This is mind blowing. Thank you so much, Miss Katie, for hopping on here and sharing
thank
your
you.
genius. You guys get connected with her, get on her calendar, download. I've got the checklist up here. So get on that, get on her newsletter because she pours out so much good information. She's somebody you want to know. And Katie, you're going to be at our October conference, right?
So I'm supposed to be coming back from fall break that day. So right now it's a maybe, but I'm really going to try and make at least one day or the happy hour or something. So
Okay.
yeah.
Because you want to connect. And I'm speaking on Saturday. So you guys,
Okay. So if I
need
come at all, it
be-
needs to be Saturday.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And
So
we have
come-
a happy hour this Friday.
I know I'm going to, it really sounds like I'm like super busy, but I swear I'm not. Just September's been crazy, but I'm already going to another event on Friday. For that healthcare conference I spoke to. They're here in Denver and they invited me to come to this event. So yeah, but yeah. Oh yeah. Thank you.
So it was an absolute pleasure. Thank you for spending time with here. You guys, if you don't already, if you're not connected with me, you can connect with me, sharingtheshine.com. Katie do the katiebrinkley.live/checklist. The link is in the chat. Click on that, get it. You want this information. So thank you guys, and we will see you all next Tuesday. Bye.
Kathy, you got 1 minute?